Gas prices on the rise again. The national average is up by nearly 10 cents compared to a week ago, just on the anticipation of continued crude oil increases. After OPEC then overnight announcing massive cuts to oil production on Wednesday, a move sought by Saudi Arabia and Russia. A big setback for President Biden, who was criticized for that fist bump visit with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman back in July, when he was promised some short-term oil price relief. Well, that now has evaporated.
The trip was not essentially for oil. The trip was about the Middle East and about Israel and rationalization of positions. But it is a disappointment, and it says that there are problems.
Higher gas prices coming just a month in advance, of course, of the midterms likely will hurt Democrats as Republicans zero in on inflation. And joining us now is Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama, and former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Ivo Daalder, joining us, President of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, Global Affairs President. Ben, let's talk about this move by OPEC. It could not have come at a worse time. It benefits Russia with its war in Ukraine, its more profits from oil, Iran, obviously the Saudis. And the White House is clearly disappointed. They took that high-risk summit on the hopes and actually the promise many reported at the time that they would get some oil relief, and there was some interim price relief, but they've now raised the prices.
Yeah, I mean, Andrea, in every way possible, this is the worst timing. You have a situation where you have not just the issue of high gas prices here, but you have Europe getting ready for a very difficult winter when it comes to energy prices. You have the West trying to choke off the oil revenues that are the last remaining lifeblood of the Russian military-industrial complex and war machine. And you had a U.S. president kind of go out on a limb here with his visit to Saudi Arabia, which was on a whole host of issues, but was really based on the idea that we wanted to address what we saw in the United States as potentially overlapping interests with the Saudis. We wanted to make sure that they were on the same team when it came to the circumstances in Russia. And this is a giant, glaring message from the Saudis that, no, we don't share your interests. Our interests are right now in boosting these prices so that we get more revenues. We don't care if that undercuts a lot of your not just domestic politics, but a lot of your foreign policy goals, particularly as it relates to Russia and the circumstances in Europe. I don't know how many times, Andrea, we need to get a message from the Saudis that we don't necessarily share interest here. That's the message that came loud and clear from that OPEC meeting. They'd been warned. They'd had all manner of communications from the United States and other governments that this is the worst possible time to do this. And yet they chose to take the side of really Russia in this current moment. And it's going to have serious consequences, not just for consumers, but for some of our foreign policies around the world. And I'm sure the administration is looking at how do you recalibrate the Saudi relationship and how do you mitigate the effects of this on the global energy markets and prices.
You've got Senator Blumenthal, Congressman Tom Malinowski, both Democrats, saying we should be pulling troops out of Saudi Arabia, our missile defenses, changing our whole posture there. And I'm sure some Republicans will also weigh in on that. Ivo Daalder, this is also a time when, according to the Wall Street Journal, the administration is considering lifting some of the sanctions on Maduro, the Maduro government in Venezuela, and letting Chevron pump oil again out of Venezuela to try to offset this. So it puts them in a bind, as well as a force helping Iran and Putin.
It really does put the administration in a bind. And, you know, as Ben said, with friends like these, the Saudis, who needs enemies? I mean, it is really extraordinary to see this happening. Remember, 4 days after Russia annexed part of Ukraine, to have the deputy prime minister join the Saudis in chairing a meeting designed to give Russia more leeway, more capability to prosecute a war that is not only widely condemned around the world, but is extraordinary from a global stability standpoint. Do the Saudis really expect the United States now to come to its aid if it were to be attacked in the region? Those are the kinds of questions that I think are legitimately on the table and need to be answered with some due care. It's not just on Capitol Hill. I think increasingly folks around the region are asking on whose side are the Saudis, and why are we continuing to think that having the kind of security relationship we've had with them redounds to our benefit. It doesn't. It redounds to the benefit of the Saudis, which is understandable, but we don't have to necessarily accept that. At the same time, we find the West is still united. The European Union has now agreed on an oil price cap, which will hopefully have a real impact on the ability of the Russians to continue to sell oil at a price that makes them richer than they deserve. And we just need to persevere. The reality here is we're in for a long winter in Europe, or in a long winter in Ukraine, and we need to make sure that we stand together and remember who our real friends are. They're in Europe, they're in Asia, they're apparently not in the Gulf.
And then we've got North Korea. Talk about things you don't want to happen right heading into the midterms. Ben, let's talk about North Korea. Kim Jong-un not only not deterred by the Ronald Reagan, the carrier group going in and the joint exercises, but using that as the excuse at the Security Council yesterday, joined by Russia and China, to say that the U.S. provoked the missile launches, this flurry of ballistic missile launches. We haven't seen this since 2017. And now fears of a nuclear launch that could be coming after China's Party Congress.
Yeah, I mean, I think for North Korea, they have an interest in testing their missile technology. But I think part of what's happening here, Andrea, is that the relationship between the United States and the West, Japan, South Korea, with Russia and China has obviously been through a period of enormous tension with the war in Ukraine, with rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait. And whereas Russia and China might have in the past tried to play some moderating influence on North Korean behavior, it may be that they have some interest in stirring up tensions right now. And so at a minimum, they're removing any potential guardrails in their own messaging to North Korea. So I think we can see these tensions in the Korean Peninsula as really an extension of the broader geopolitical tensions in the world between particularly the United States and Russia and China. And we're seeing this along the periphery in Iran, too, obviously, where you've got a really inspiring protest movement, a really brutal crackdown taking place. When you have a big war like you have in Ukraine and you have huge tensions between the two largest economies in the world, the United States and China, I think sometimes you see these other flashpoints boil over at a more alarming rate than it might have been in the past. And frankly, I think this is just part of the landscape that we're going to be dealing with now for the foreseeable future.
Ivo, how worried should we be about what North Korea is doing with its advances, all of these ballistic missile tests, as well as the prospect of a nuclear test?
Well, we'll always have to be worried. The reality is they have real capabilities, and they're testing real capabilities that in the last few days, flying missiles over Japan, which also means they can reach Japan. And we know they can reach a lot further, possibly even the continental United States. At the same time, I think we have to be aware that this is in some ways just a demonstration by Kim Jong-un to sort of waving the flag and saying, we're here, don't ignore us, you need to pay attention to us, and trying, as I think Ben rightly says, sort of play the game of setting the United States off against Russia and China. On the other hand, it is worrisome. They do have nuclear weapons. They can reach significant territory in the United States and other parts of the world. But the reality is also that if they were to think of even doing that seriously, they have to be aware that the consequences would be equally severe, if not more so. The United States remains the biggest power militarily in Asia, and any threat or any direct action against any of our allies would lead to direct and serious consequences.